You're watching The Marketplace. Time to mix some business with politics. And top on the agenda is the media budget review. And as we have been reporting today, the stakeholder engagements have begun already into the media budget. And we heard from the finance minister who has been talking about the focus, which would be to promote growth and tighten expenditure. Joining us on Zoom is Executive Director of the Policy Initiative for Economic Development, Dr. Daniel Amate Enim. Good afternoon to you. So stakeholder engagements for the media budget review have begun. As indicated, the finance minister says the focus will be on growth and measures to tighten expenditure. Is the government on track?
Yeah, thank you very much. Even before we talk about growth, I think there is a need for the minister to talk about stability. The macroeconomic environment is not yet stable as expected. Okay, it's still fragile in terms of the expected stability that is required to trigger growth. Okay, as much as inflation, reduced marginally for the month of June from 23.1 to 22.8 that we experienced. Now you see, the issue of the exchange rate is still high. As much as we have received the tranche from the IMF, we are not too sure whether that will be able to address that situation. So the overall macroeconomic environment is not as stable as expected. One would have expected a policy that will ensure stability. Then we can now propel growth. Okay, because before you propel growth, there's a need for stability. So I would have expected the Honorable Minister to equally focus on consolidating the progress in terms of our recovery post-COVID and sustaining and stabilizing the macroeconomic environment to be able to propel growth. As it stands now, the cost of capital is still high. The cost of living is still high. Inflation, yes, even though 22.8 as at June, quite high. And there's a need for policies to be realigned to further curtail its increases. So to me, these are some of the things that ought to be looked at before we actually zoom for growth. But growth is very important. But the point I'm making is that before you get to growth, there's a need for you to stabilize your macroeconomic environment.
So the finance minister is asking for the buy-in of financial sector players. Any idea what they may have up their sleeve that would need the buy-in of banks and other financial institutions?
Yes, I think the financial institutions, they play a very critical role in overall growth of the economy because they mobilize excess liquidity for onward lending to businesses, even as well as government. So anytime they are performing that particular function very well, it stimulates economic growth. So their involvement is very key. But one of the things that ought to be addressed, as far as the financial institution is concerned, has to do with the cost of capital. That's cost of lending. The cost of lending averagely 30% thereabout is still very high for a businessman that is producing similar goods and receiving competition from Thailand, China, etc. That is it. But as it stands, it appears that the bank's ability to mobilize so much excess liquidity to be able to lend is largely also dependent on the macroeconomic environment. That's where I started from, the macroeconomic stability, where inflation cannot be predicted. Of course, you don't expect them to give rate that at the end of the day they will not be able to meet investment from their investors. So they play a very critical role, but the overall performance of the macroeconomic environment will allow them to be able to perform that function very well by supporting businesses and individuals as well as to stimulate overall economic growth.
And there's been plenty talk about taxes. Seeing it is an election year, do you think the government may succumb to pressure to review some tax policies, also bearing in mind that the IMF would be watching?
It's a very dicey situation. It will be economic scenario against political expediency. But the point is that we need resources to be able to drive development policies applied by the government over the period. And it appears domestically we're struggling with the revenue mobilization. So to me, any attempt to remove taxes just to appease citizens for them by virtue of any political power may be fatal, just like you rightly indicated. IMF is watching. But if the tax removal or reduction in taxes is to support industry to be able to beef up production and support overall growth of the economy, if that is the justification, or of course, I'm of the view that as much as IMF will not be too happy, but they will agree because it's within the medium to long-term perspective to support growth. My view, when they come to taxes, now you don't just remove taxes for the sake of removing taxes. It must be sector specific. and it must be for a particular purpose or essence to be able to drive growth. And if that is done, maybe, for example, if government realize that, look, we need to encourage, how do you call it, consumption of local rice, and so you are giving incentives to players in that particular sector to be able to produce rice at a competitive prices, well, of course, it's a very good initiative because overall it's going to stimulate economic growth, create jobs, and minimize importation of foreign rice, which will help your city to stabilize. So these are the rationale that ought to go into it. But if it is for the purposes of appeasing the citizens and winning the political power, then that would be very fatal.
All right, another quick political headline is the minorities plan to stage a demonstration, that'll be the second one, against the Bank of Ghana over claims of wasteful expenditure. Do you think this is leading anywhere, or is just politics at play?
In fact, when it comes to, let me admit, as much as it is the democratic right or constitutional right of any citizen to demonstrate against displeasure of any government or administrative body established under the law, it is also very important that in doing so, we need to reconsider the strategic role that the BoG plays in an economy. These are the institutions that, regardless of whoever comes to power, will have to work with that institution. And it's a very sensitive institution because of the role that it plays, both domestically and internationally. And of my view is that any displeasure from the minority, they should find a way of judge with the BoG, probably having a meeting with them to understand why they're behaving in that particular manner, and then put up an alternative way of managing the situation better. Repeated demonstration, my view is that it will dent the reputation of BoG. Tomorrow, if NDC wins power, it's going to work with the institution. And as I indicated, Bank of Ghana is a very critical institution, both domestically and international. So as much as I agree that demonstration is part of our democratic way of demanding accountability from state institutions, when it comes to Bank of Ghana, a caution, we need to tread cautiously because it's very important for the growth of the economy.
Well, final question. The central bank it has responded to this claim that it wasted monies. It says it didn't do that. In question, though, is the new building that the central bank, for instance, is trying to put up. People saying, well, it's needless at this time, especially when you are incurring losses. You think the central bank has questions to answer, really?
I think I responded to this particular recall very well. If not on your platform, then maybe one of the international platforms. My view still holds is that this is a strategic national asset. You know, putting up a new edifice is a national asset. I have been to Bank of Ghana, and even recently I've been there. And then those who know them very well, you realize that the place is not fit for its purpose. Directly behind Bank of Ghana, we have people cooking and selling, setting out fire and these things. So it is not even wise, you know, them being there. The issue, which I may agree with minority, is maybe probably the value, if maybe in their expectation, and there's an evidence to prove that, of course, this same project would have been done with an S amount of money than what Bank of Ghana is using, then that may be a justification. But the justification that Bank of Ghana is putting up a new building and that is wrong, I respectfully disagree with that view. I have been to an opportunity of being to nations that their airport is 10 times bigger than Ghana. They are putting up a new one, and you ask them and they'll tell you it's for a strategic reason, it's for the future, and it is to adapt to their overall infrastructure and the edifice. So to me, any building that will adapt to our infrastructure base and also rightfully position the brand as Bank of Ghana is a step in the right direction, provided that value is an appreciable value that is being spent. You know, so that has been my view. That has been my view.
Lamate Enim, Executive Director, Policy Initiative for Economic Development. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.